General Vera Koss did not believe in compromise. Standing 8 feet tall with scales like polished obsidian, she cut an imposing figure on the command deck of the Crimson Talon. Her species, the Draviks, had conquered 17 star systems through sheer military superiority. They were warriors, bred for combat, trained from hatching to view emotion as weakness and mercy as foolishness, which made the current situation an unforgivable insult. "Repeat that, Commander Vex," Vera said, her voice a low rumble that made the smaller officer's crest flatten against his skull in submission. "The Galactic Accord has been ratified, General. All signatory species must participate in the Cultural Exchange Initiative." Vex's clawed hands trembled slightly as he held out the data tablet. "You've been assigned a human liaison. A human." Vera's amber eyes blazed. "Those fragile, emotional primitives who weep at fictional stories and form attachments to domesticated animals. The accord is mandatory, General. Refusal would result in— I know what it would result in." Vera snatched the tablet, her tail lashing with barely controlled fury. Economic sanctions, trade embargoes, potential expulsion from the Galactic Council. The Dravik's empire needed the advanced medical technology and agricultural innovations that council membership provided. They could not afford isolation. But this? Forced integration with a species the Draviks had nearly gone to war with 3 years ago. It was humiliation disguised as diplomacy. Vera scrolled through the file, her sharp teeth grinding audibly. Dr. Adrian Cross, age 32. Specializations in xenoanthropology, conflict resolution. And she nearly laughed. Emotional intelligence training. The human's photograph showed a lean male with intelligent green eyes and an infuriatingly calm expression. "When does this liaison arrive?" she demanded. "His shuttle docks in 20 minutes, General. 20 minutes. Barely enough time to formulate a plan." Vera's mind, honed by decades of tactical training, worked rapidly. The Accord mandated these partnerships, but it didn't specify what form they would take. If she could prove that humans were fundamentally incompatible with Dravik's culture and suited for the harsh realities of military life, then perhaps she could have this particular human reassigned. And if one human failed, it might set a precedent. "Have him brought to Training Bay 7 upon arrival," she ordered. "Not the diplomatic suites. The Training Bay." Vex's eyes widened. "General, the protocols." "I am following protocol, Commander. The Accord requires cultural immersion and mutual understanding. What better way to understand Dravik's culture than to experience our training regimen?" Her smile showed too many teeth. "If Dr. Cross wishes to study us, let him do so from the floor of our most challenging environment." Adrian Cross had expected resistance. What he hadn't expected was to be escorted directly from the docking bay to what appeared to be a military torture chamber. Training Bay 7 was massive, easily 3 stories high, with equipment that looked designed for creatures twice human size and 3 times human strength. Gravity simulators, combat arenas with automated defense systems, obstacle courses that would challenge Olympic athletes, and environmental chambers that currently displayed a temperature reading of -40 degrees Celsius. Double quotes Dr. Cross. The voice came from above. Adrian looked up to see General Vera Koss descending a training platform with fluid grace despite her massive frame. She was even more imposing in person than her file photos suggested. Her black scales caught the harsh lighting, creating an almost iridescent effect. And her eyes glowed with an intelligence that reminded Adrian this was not just a warrior, but a brilliant strategist who'd never lost a military engagement. General Koss. Adrian inclined his head respectfully. I appreciate the warm welcome. Was that sarcasm? Vera studied the human closely. He stood barely to her chest, his frame slight by Dravik's standards. Yet his posture showed no fear. Interesting. The Galactic Accord has forced us into this partnership. Dr. Cross, I did not request it, and I do not welcome it. However, I am a soldier, and I follow orders. She descended the final steps, her clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. You wish to understand Dravik's culture? Then you will undergo the same trials our warriors face. When you fail and you will fail, you may request reassignment to a more suitable species. Adrian adjusted his pack, seemingly unfazed. And if I don't fail? Impossible. Humans lack the physical capabilities and mental fortitude required. Then you have nothing to lose by making it interesting. Adrian met her gaze directly, something few beings dared to do. For every trial I complete successfully, you agree to engage in one genuine cultural exchange. Not observation, participation. You learn something about human culture with an open mind. Vera's crest rose with indignation. You presume to negotiate. I presume to make this partnership worthwhile for both of us. You want to prove I'll fail. I want to prove there's value in what humans offer. If I can't complete your trials, you're right, I'll request reassignment and recommend the program be restructured. Adrian's expression remained calm, almost friendly. But if I succeed, you might discover that strength comes in forms you haven't considered. The audacity was breathtaking. This small, fragile creature was proposing terms to her, one of the Dravik's empire's most decorated generals. She should refuse. She should have him thrown into the brig for insubordination. Instead, Vera found herself intrigued. Perhaps watching this human's inevitable failure would be more satisfying. If he'd been given false hope first. Agreed, she said. Your first trial begins now. Survival training in a simulated hostile environment. You will be placed in our environmental chamber, which will replicate the surface of Krevek's prima frozen wasteland, with temperatures dropping to -60°C, unpredictable ice storms, and limited oxygen. You must survive for 6 hours while completing 3 objectives. She gestured to the massive chamber. Most Dravik's recruits fail their first attempt. Adrian studied the chamber thoughtfully. What equipment am I permitted? Standard survival pack, same as our recruits receive. Then let's begin. 4 hours into the trial, Vera found herself watching the monitors with an attention that had nothing to do with anticipating failure. The human should have been a frozen corpse by now. The temperature had dropped to -58°C. Ice storms had reduced visibility to near zero 3 times. The oxygen levels were barely sufficient for Dravik's lungs, which were considerably more efficient than human respiratory systems. Yet Dr. Adrian Cross was not only alive, he'd completed 2 of the 3 objectives. Explain this. Vera demanded. gesturing at the screen, showing Adrian constructing some kind of shelter from ice blocks. Vex consulted his readouts. He's building an igloo, General. Apparently a traditional human cold weather shelter. The ice actually provides insulation by trapping air pockets. Body heat warms the interior, and I understand the principle, Commander. What I don't understand is how he's moving with such efficiency in these conditions. They watched as Adrian, wearing thermal gear that should have been inadequate, moved with careful deliberation. He wasn't trying to match Dravik's strength or speed. Instead, he was conserving energy, planning each action, using the environment rather than fighting it. He's been resting inside the shelter at regular intervals, Vex reported, allowing his core temperature to stabilize before venturing out again. It's actually efficient, General. Vera's tail twitched with irritation. Or was it something else? She'd expected brute force attempts, panic. The emotional breakdown her briefings on humans had suggested was inevitable under stress. Instead, she was watching someone who understood his limitations and adapted accordingly. The comm crackled. General Cos? Adrian's voice was steady despite the conditions. I've completed Objective 3. I believe that concludes the trial. Vera activated her microphone. Confirmed. Return to the exit point for extraction. 20 minutes later. Adrian stood before her in the observation bay, his thermal suit covered in frost, but his expression composed. He was shivering a human physiological response to cold, but his eyes were alert and assessing. Well, he asked simply. Vera's scales rippled, a sign of grudging respect in Dravik's body language. You passed? Barely. I'll take it. Adrian smiled, an expression that showed teeth, but somehow conveyed warmth rather than threat. Which means you owe me a cultural exchange, General. What human weakness do you wish to inflict upon me? The words came out more harshly than intended. Not weakness, understanding. Adrian gestured to a cleared area of the observation bay. I'd like to teach you about laughter. Laughter. Vera's tone was flat. The involuntary spasmodic response to humorous stimuli. A waste of breath and energy. Is that what your briefings told you? Adrian pulled out a small holographic projector from his pack. Let me show you something. The projection activated, showing scenes from human entertainment, physical comedy, wordplay, situational humor. Vera watched with clinical detachment at first, analyzing each scenario. Humans falling over objects, exaggerated facial expressions, absurd misunderstandings. Then Adrian showed her something different. Soldiers in a human military outpost, exhausted after a difficult mission, sharing jokes and laughing together. Their fatigue visibly lifting, their bonds strengthening. Laughter isn't just a response to humor, Adrian explained quietly. It's a survival mechanism. It reduces stress hormones, releases endorphins, strengthens social bonds. When humans laugh together, especially in difficult circumstances, we're literally healing each other, making ourselves stronger for the next challenge. Vera stared at the projection, watching battle-worn soldiers transform through shared mirth. This is tactical. Everything about human evolution is tactical, General. We didn't survive as a species through physical superiority. We survived through connection, through supporting each other emotionally and psychologically. What you call weakness, we call resilience. For the first time in her military career, Vera felt uncertain. She'd been taught that emotion was the enemy of efficiency, that bonds between soldiers were acceptable only insofar as they supported unit cohesion. But this human was suggesting something more complex, that emotion itself could be a weapon, a tool, a source of strength. "I don't laugh," she said finally. "Maybe not yet." Adrian's smile was gentle, not mocking. "But you have 2 more trials to design for me, General. And I'll have 2 more cultural exchanges to share with you. We have time." As Adrian was escorted to his assigned quarters, Vera stood alone in the observation bay, staring at her reflection in the dark viewport. Her scales gleamed like armor in the low light, beautiful in their way, but hard, impenetrable. For 3 decades, she'd worn her reputation as the Empire's most fearsome general like a badge of honor. The Obsidian Warlord, they called her, unbeatable, uncompromising, unyielding. But watching that small human survive conditions designed to break Dravik's recruits, using not strength but ingenuity, and then watching him speak with such conviction about joy and connection as forms of power, something shifted inside her armored chest. Not much, just a hairline crack in certainty she'd held her entire life. "Computer," she said quietly. "Access human cultural database. Category, humor, laughter, and social bonding behaviors," as data filled her screens. General Vera Koss told herself this was purely tactical research. Understanding the enemy, even an enemy turned forced ally, was simply good strategy. She did not acknowledge the small, unfamiliar sensation that felt almost like curiosity, like anticipation for what tomorrow's trial would reveal, like the first terrifying flutter of opening one's mind to something new. The Strategic Operations Center of the Crimson Talon represented the pinnacle of Dravik's military technology. Holographic star maps floated in 3-dimensional space. Weapon systems interfaced directly with neural implants, and tactical simulations could model warfare scenarios with 98% accuracy. It was here that General Vera Koss designed the second trial. "This is excessive, General," Commander Vex observed, reviewing the parameters she'd programmed. "You're pitting him against the Corvath scenario. That's our most advanced tactical simulation. Candidates train for months before attempting it." Vera's claws tapped against the control console in an unconscious rhythm. 3 days had passed since the environmental trial, and she'd spent an unreasonable amount of time reviewing footage of Adrian's performance. Not because she was impressed, certainly not, but because she needed to understand how he'd succeeded, how he'd turned disadvantage into advantage. And perhaps, though she would never admit it aloud, because she'd spent her evenings accessing those human cultural databases, learning about laughter had led to learning about art, music, literature. The depth and complexity of human emotional expression was a disconcerting, inefficient, yet somehow undeniably sophisticated. Dr. Cross claimed humans offer value beyond physical capability. Vera said, her tone carefully neutral. "This trial will test that assertion. If human thinking truly has merit, he'll find a solution our best strategists haven't. And if he fails, then we've proven what we suspected all along." Vera's words rang hollow even to her own ears. Adrian entered the operations center with the same calm demeanor he'd shown since arrival. He'd spent the past 3 days exploring accessible areas of the ship, conversing with lower-ranking Dravix personnel, who seemed more curious than hostile about the human presence. Vera had received 17 reports of fraternization that she'd filed away without comment. Dr. Cross, she gestured to the Central Command Station. Your second trial is a tactical simulation. You will command a Dravix fleet against an overwhelming enemy force. The Corvath are a ruthless species that outmatches us in numbers and firepower. Your mission is to defend our colony on Sigma-7 while inflicting maximum damage to enemy forces. Adrian approached the holographic display, his eyes scanning the battlefield with focused intensity. Time limit: 2 hours real time, representing 6 hours tactical time. Most candidates achieve a survival rate of 35%. Anything above 50% is considered exceptional. Vera crossed her arms, her tail curling in anticipation. The simulation adapts to counter your strategies. There is no known winning scenario, only degrees of acceptable loss. What constitutes victory in Dravix's tactical doctrine? The question was more perceptive than expected. Survival of the primary objective. In this case, the colony. Military assets are secondary, but factor into overall performance rating. Adrian nodded slowly, his fingers exploring the interface. And what are the rules of engagement? Standard Dravix warfare protocols. Overwhelming force. Strategic targeting of enemy command structures. Acceptable civilian casualties if militarily necessary. Acceptable civilian casualties. Adrian repeated softly. Interesting choice of words. War requires difficult choices. Dr. Cross. Emotion cannot interfere with tactical necessity. We'll see. His smile was enigmatic. I'm ready to begin, General. Vera settled into the observation station. Her tactical officers ranged around her. This would be enlightening. Humans were known for their emotional decision-making, their reluctance to accept necessary casualties, their inefficient attachment to preserving individual lives over strategic objectives. Begin simulation, she commanded. The first 20 minutes confirmed Vera's expectations. Adrian's initial deployments were defensive, conservative, prioritizing the protection of the colony over aggressive engagement. Standard human sentimentality, the Corvath forces, represented by crimson projections in the holographic display, advanced in their characteristic swarm pattern. Hundreds of smaller attack craft supported by massive carrier vessels, designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. He's going to be overrun, Vex murmured. His defensive perimeter is too thin. But then something unexpected happened. Adrian began transmitting messages to the Corvath fleet. Not standard military communications, but civilian distress signals, medical emergencies, evacuation requests. What is he doing? Vera leaned forward, her crest rising with confusion. The simulation adapted, as programmed. The Corvath ignored the signals and pressed their attack. But Adrian had gained something. Time. Precious seconds while the enemy AI processed the unusual communications. He used those seconds to scatter his forces in patterns. That made no tactical sense by Dravix standards. Ships broke formation, fled in seemingly random directions, abandoned strategic positions. He's panicking. One of the tactical officers said with barely concealed satisfaction. No, Vera said slowly, her eyes tracking the movements. He's herding them. It took another 15 minutes for the pattern to become clear. Adrian wasn't scattering his forces randomly, he was creating a maze. Using his own ships as bait to draw the corvette into specific trajectories. And at the center of that maze, he'd positioned a single colony transport ship, outfitted with mining explosives. He's weaponizing civilian vessels, Vex breathed. That's prohibited under our tactical doctrine. It's not prohibited, Vera corrected. Her voice tight. It simply never occurred to us. The corvette swarmed the transport, seeing an easy target. Adrian detonated the explosives at the precise moment of maximum enemy density. The explosion cascaded through the tightly packed enemy formation, destroying or disabling 40% of their forces in a single stroke. But Adrian wasn't finished. While the enemy reeled, he executed a series of micro-jumps, short-range warp maneuvers that Dravik's doctrine deemed too dangerous near planetary bodies. His fleet materialized behind enemy command carriers, targeting not their weapon systems, but their communication arrays. He's blinding them. Vera whispered. Without coordination, the corvette swarm collapsed into chaos. Individual ships continued attacking, but their tactical advantage synchronized movement was gone. Adrian's forces picked them off methodically, using minimum force to maximum effect. When the simulation timer reached 2 hours, the results scrolled across Vera's display. Colony survival, 100% military asset preservation, 78%. Enemy forces neutralized, 91% tactical rating. Unprecedented operations center fell silent. Adrian stepped back from the command station, stretching his shoulders with a wince. I assume that meets the threshold for success. Vera couldn't speak. In 30 years of military service, she'd never seen anyone achieve above 65% in this simulation. Her own best score, achieved after months of preparation, had been 72%. How? The word emerged before she could stop it. Adrian turned to face her, and his expression was serious. You asked what constitutes victory in Dravik's doctrine, but you didn't ask what constitutes victory in human terms. We don't measure success by acceptable losses, General. We measure it by everyone coming home. That's impossible in warfare, Vera said. But her conviction wavered. It's impossible if you think like a Dravik's. Your tactical doctrine is brilliant, I'm not disputing that. But it's built on assumptions about what's acceptable that humans fundamentally reject. We can't match your physical power, so we learned to think differently. To use creativity, unpredictability, to treat every life as worth preserving. He gestured to the display. You taught your simulation to counter Dravik's tactics. It had no programming for human ones. Vex spoke up hesitantly. You used deception, civilian vessels as weapons, tactics that could be considered dishonorable. I used what I had available to protect the colony with minimal casualties on both sides. If that's dishonorable, then perhaps honor needs a broader definition. Adrian's gaze never left Vera's, which brings us to my second cultural exchange. General, they met in what passed for the ship's meditation chamber. A quiet space Dravik's officers used for tactical review and mental preparation. Adrian had requested privacy, and Vera had agreed, though she wasn't certain why. Forgiveness, Adrian said, settling onto the floor with cross-legged ease. That's what I want to teach you about today. Forgiveness is weakness. It allows enemies to exploit you. Is that what you believe, or what you were taught to believe? Adrian's tone held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Vera's scales rippled uncomfortably. They are the same thing, are they? Tell me, General, have you ever made a mistake in your military career? The question was like a physical blow. Once, early in my command, I ordered an attack on enemy positions that turned out to be civilian shelters. The intelligence was faulty. 43 non-combatants died. Her voice remained steady, but something in her chest tightened. I was disciplined, retrained, and returned to duty. The incident is recorded in my file. And have you forgiven yourself? Vera's head snapped up. Forgiveness isn't relevant. I learned from the error and ensured it never happened again. That is sufficient, is it? Adrian's green eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. Because from what I've observed, you push yourself harder than any officer on this ship. You accept no margin for error. You've built a reputation as the Obsidian warlord, unbreakable, unbeatable, perfect. You've created armor not just around your body, but around your heart. You know nothing about me, Vera said, but the words lacked force. I know what it's like to carry guilt. 3 years ago, I was part of the diplomatic team negotiating the ceasefire between our species. I recommended a treaty provision that inadvertently led to the deaths of human colonists. In a neutral zone, your forces claimed we'd violated the terms, and they weren't entirely wrong. The ambiguity in my wording created the loophole. Adrian's voice was quiet but steady. I blamed myself. I stopped sleeping. I pushed myself to be perfect at my work because I thought if I just never made another mistake, it would somehow balance the scales. What changed? Despite herself, Vera leaned forward. A human concept we call therapy. I talked to someone trained in helping people process trauma and guilt, and they taught me something crucial. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about accepting that we're all imperfect beings doing our best in complex situations. It's about learning and growing instead of calcifying in our pain. Vera's claws flexed against the floor. Draviks don't have such concepts. We have duty and discipline, and look where that's brought you. You're the most successful general in your empire's history, and you're absolutely miserable. The blunt assessment should have angered her. Instead, Vera felt something crack deeper, the fissure that had started during the environmental trial widening further. I don't know how to be anything else, she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. Adrian rose and moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild creature. You don't have to be anything else, but you could be more. You could be a brilliant general who also allows herself moments of peace, who acknowledges her mistakes and learns from them without carrying them as permanent wounds, who recognizes that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites, they're partners. Your species thinks too much, Vera said, but her voice was rough with emotion she couldn't name. Maybe, but we've survived because of it. Because we've learned that the battles we fight in here. He tapped his chest over his heart. are often more important than the ones we fight out there. Before Vera could respond, the ship's alarm shrieked to life. Red emergency lighting flooded the meditation chamber. As Commander Vex's voice crackled over the intercom, General Koss to the bridge immediately. We're under attack by pirate vessels. They've damaged our engines and are attempting to board. The moment of vulnerability vanished instantly. Vera was on her feet, her military bearing restored in a heartbeat. Battle stations. I want all security teams to defensive positions. But as she moved toward the door, she realized Adrian was following her. Dr. Cross, proceed to the secure bunkers. No. His voice was firm. Your ship is under attack. You need every capable person, and I'm combat certified. I'm coming with you. Vera should have refused. Protocol demanded civilians be secured first. But time was critical, and something in his eyes, the same determination she'd seen in the environmental chamber, in the tactical simulation, made her nod curtly. Stay close. If you die, the diplomatic fallout will be considerable. I'll try to avoid that. His attempt at humor during a crisis was so distinctly human that Vera almost smiled. They ran toward the breach point together, general and liaison, warrior and diplomat, to beings from different worlds rushing toward danger side by side. And in that moment, as weapons fire echoed through the corridors ahead, Vera realized with startling clarity that she was no longer trying to prove Adrian would fail. She was hoping desperately that he would survive.